Week 1 is almost in the books, and I'm sure you guys are panicked. As are a lot of fantasy players this time of year, the Week 1 overreaction is very, very real. Should you be worried about that guy you drafted early on who had a down week? Your Amon-Ra St. Browns, Marvin Harrison Jr.'s, those type of guys. Or can I talk you off the ledge with some good usage notes to predict future fantasy performance? We're talking about guys that you should be panicked on or guys that you should not be panicked on in today's video. Spoiler alert here, the wide receiver position and quarterback position specifically had an outlier bad week 1 in terms of yardage and in terms of touchdown output. You can see only 33 passing touchdowns in week 1. That is the lowest mark of the last several years. And then the passing yardage leaders, I mean, other than Baker Mayfield, Tua Tagovailoa, CJ Stroud, Josh Allen, Anthony Richardson, pretty much everybody else had a down week in terms of overall passing yardage, hence the down wide receiver and tight end production this week. Speaking of tight ends, we are going to talk about should you be panicked on your elite tight end? And I'm using the word elite very loosely right now because really outside of like Brock Bowers, Kyle Pitts, Sam Laporta, David Njoku, and Trey McBride, none of the tight ends that you drafted to be these like elite positional advantages really hit in fantasy. You look at the top 10 tight ends on the week so far, and you got Isaiah Likely and Foster Moreau, and again, even the top, guys that were expected to be good, like Bowers and Pitts and those type of guys, they're only posting like 11 PPR points. So not a great week for the tight end position at all. Pretty much every tight end sucked. If you guys are watching this, I'm sure your tight end sucked. My tight end sucked with David Njoku. Mine actually got injured as well. The only guy that could be the saving grace is George Kittle playing on Monday Night Football today. I think the big should I panic tight ends that a lot of people are wondering about are Mark Andrews, 3.4 points in week 1, and of course, massively outscored by Isaiah Likely. Travis Kelce had 6.4 points on Thursday Night Football as well. Dalton Kincaid had 2.1 points, and Evan Engram had 1.5 points. All of these guys were drafted as top 10 guys, expected to be elite positional advantages in some cases, especially for Travis Kelce and Andrews and Kincaid. Rapid fire, kind of should you be worried, yellow light, green light, red light. Let's start with Kelce. He ran 84% of the routes. The ADOT was a little low, but I'm not worried at all. The Kansas City Chiefs offense looked really good. Patrick Mahomes looked really good. Xavier Worthy obviously stretched the field very well. I just think Kelce had a bad game. It's Thursday Night Football in week 1. Sometimes we see some anomalies in that first game, so I'm not worried about Kelce. In fact, I'd probably be buying low on Kelce right now. Mark Andrews, I am a little bit more worried for because he had 75% of the routes for the Ravens, which was down from 94% last year in his healthy games. And Isaiah Likely, of course, was the one with the big game, had over 100 yards, 69% of the routes for the Ravens on Thursday night, which was up from his 53% mark last year. And not only that, but when Mark Andrews was healthy, he was hovering around like the 20 to 30% range. So he was not a factor at all for the Ravens offense unless Mark Andrews was out. I am legit worried for Andrews because I tend to think that he'll still be a good tight end. I tend to think he'll still be a top 10 option, but does he have the tight end 1 overall ceiling if they're going to run a lot of 2 tight end looks, if Isaiah Likely is going to be the move tight end and Andrews is kind of more the inline in the slot type of guy? Again, I tend to think he'll still be good, but overall, I think I'm a little bit worried for his ceiling. And that gives me a little bit of a yellow light, but almost red on Mark Andrews because I do think that Likely could be a fixture of this offense going forward. Dalton Kincaid had 83% of the routes, 84% of the snaps, just didn't get the targets, honestly. The Josh Allen Buffalo Bills offense was really strange. Allen wasn't really passing for a whole lot of yards in the first half of the game, and then in the second half, it just ended up being bombs away. I would not panic on Dalton Kincaid. Again, if anything, buy low. The usage was really good. Dawson Knox wasn't really a factor. He was only on the field in 2 tight end sets. The route participation and the snaps are elite marks for the tight end position. If you're over 80%, you have very much in the range of outcomes that you could finish as the tight end 1 overall. So those route participation and snap share marks have me not worried for Dalton Kincaid. Obviously commands some more targets going forward, but I'm overall not that worried. Evan Engram saw a decline in playing time with Brenton Strange for some reason, getting a lot more run, and it appears that Brian Thomas Jr. and Gabriel Davis, in addition to Christian Kirk, are definitely going to play a factor in that wide receiver core and potentially lead to Evan Engram getting much less targets than the league-leading 143 he had last year among tight ends and 114 receptions that he had among tight ends. Again, he was tight end 4 in PPR points per game, despite leading the position by a decent margin in targets and in receptions. I was not drafting Evan Engram. I'm legit concerned if you guys did. Not necessarily because of this one game performance, because it's week one, things can change, obviously. But just in general, I thought this going into the year that he was going to see a big downtick in targets, and it appears that might be the case, especially knowing that he ran a little bit less routes, had a little bit less of a snap share than he did in past years. And then the other tight ends that we got to be worried about is David Njoku, who's expected to be out about 2 to 6 weeks with a high ankle sprain, according to Ian Rappaport. Dr. Jesse Morris of the Fantasy Injury Experts is all the medical information that I'm going to be quoting from today's video. He put out a recap video he always does on Sunday nights, and he basically said 2 to 6 weeks is the timeline for a high ankle sprain for Njoku. Hopefully he can avoid IR, and it's just like a 2 to 3 week injury, but these things can be a little bit finicky. And then Jake Ferguson, one of the other top 12 tight ends that was drafted in fantasy drafts this year, had a major injury at first. It looked like he actually tore his ACL, but he could avoid that by the sounds of it. It sounds like they're optimistic he did not tear his ACL, but it's probably a bone bruise or an MCL sprain, according to Jesse Morris. Again, obviously, these are both red lights due to the injury, but I think within the next 3 to 4 weeks, these guys should be back on the field, hopefully in that time, but we'll get more information in the coming hours, in the coming days. Now let's get into the non-tight ends, because I think the tight end position was one that was a hot topic on Twitter, especially. Marvin Harrison Jr., the top 5 pick in the NFL draft, had 1 catch for 4 yards on 3 targets in his first NFL game. Kyler, of course, missing Marvin, streaking wide open down the sideline for what would have been like a 40-yard touchdown. So do you love the 3 targets? Do you love the 10% target share while Greg Dortch and Trey McBride gobble up every target in the offense? They had like 17 combined targets together. No, but I like the 36 out of the 38 routes. I like the fact that he played almost every snap. Marvin will get his targets. Fear not. It is a green light on Marvin Harrison Jr., just obviously not the start that you wanted because you had to draft this guy at the 1-2 turn or whatever there. So Marvin Harrison, perked my ears up a little bit, this performance, or lack thereof, but definitely not something I'm overly concerned about. Moving into Drake London, he's one guy that I think people need to be talked off the ledge on because he ran every single route. He led the team in targets. The Falcons only threw 23 times due to such a slugfest of a game script against the Pittsburgh Steelers. London himself, I think, will be just fine. The only cause for concern in this offense is just how bad the offensive line and Kirk Cousins looked, because I've seen, Hayden Winks of Underdog kind of go over some of his film, his All-22 on Twitter, and he's basically saying he's not driving his throws. It looks like he doesn't trust that Achilles, and that resulted in 6 yards per attempt in this game, only 155 passing yards against the Steelers defense, which admittedly is a really good defense, but the career average of Kirk Cousins is 255. He had 155, so that's a problem. Again, I would say mild yellow light on the offense here, but the nice thing is that if he's bad, you have Michael Penix waiting in the wings who could take over this offense and give it some life. So, again, Kirk Cousins, definitely monitor how he's playing. He did not look good in week 1, but again, it was a tough defense, very heavy pass rush, a lot of pressure on him. But like I said, people have pointed out that he's not really driving his throws, not getting a whole lot of velocity on him because it doesn't look like he's able to step into them quite as much, and that Achilles could be the reason for that. But again, thankfully, they drafted Michael Penix Jr. if things go awry or if he re-injures that. So Puka Nacua, another big-time concern for a lot of people because he was a top 15 pick. Twofold reason for the concern, too. He left Sunday night's game with a re-injury of the right knee injury that he suffered in the preseason or in the training camp cycle, which is a bursa PCL sprain. Again, I'm quoting Dr. Jesse Morris here. He was ruled out quickly, could be minor, but Dr. Morris outlined a 1 to 6 week timeline depending on the severity of the PCL. So if it's a minor PCL sprain, it's probably a 1 to 2 week injury, but because this is a re-injury and he was ruled out so fast, he sounded kind of like he was on the side of like maybe this is a 4 to 6 week injury. So again, keep in mind that we don't know yet. Puka Nacua, we should get some information on that today, potentially tomorrow. The second reason for concern is the fact that Cooper Kupp went absolutely hog wild when he wasn't on the field and looked like 2021 Cooper Kupp in that game against the Lions. I was already concerned for Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp's target shares being like really close and their production being really close. I had a sub 2% rostership on Puka Nacua going into like the last 2 or 3 weeks of Best Ball Mania season, but I'm still quite underweight on him, even though I grabbed some shares when he started to fall due to the injury. Banged up with some really tough target competition is not really the type of cocktail I want for my top fantasy wide receiver. It looks like Puka Nacua could end up being a pretty disappointing draft pick. Again, it's 1 week. We don't know the severity of his injury right now, but when he comes back, I think he could be like a top 15 to 20 option as opposed to the top 8 option that he was drafted to be, which is why I wasn't really drafting Puka Nacua a whole lot where he was going unless he fell to kind of like the mid-second round So the panic meter for me is actually red light. I wish I could be of more solace to those of you guys that drafted Puka Nacua high, but I wasn't one of those guys. And the red light meter is something that is kind of confirming my priors, which is that Cooper Kupp is still really good, and that injury was somewhat of a concern coming into the season, just like it was for Cooper Kupp last year when he was coming into the season banged up. So Derrick Henry, another one that people are probably a little bit worried about, not because of the fantasy output, because he did score a rushing touchdown in that game, but outside of the rushing touchdown, it was pretty much all bad for Derrick Henry, averaged like 3.6 yards per carry. Didn't quite look like the same running back, but Derrick Henry has a tendency to do this at the beginning of the season. At this point in Henry's career, he's just not the same spring chicken that he was 5 years ago. I think he's going to end up being a touchdown or bust RB2 this year. And hear me out. What really is the difference this year between David Montgomery, who we saw have a great game on the Detroit Lions offense, and James Conner, who we saw have a good game for the Cardinals offense, or Brian Robinson, who we found the end zone against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the worst matchup in the league for fantasy running backs? What is the difference between those guys and Derrick Henry? Because none of those guys are huge receiving backs, even though they still catch the ball more than Derrick Henry does. This is kind of like the 2023 usage of Derrick Henry that I'm really worried about too. And Derrick Henry in 2023 with the Titans, he finished outside of RB1 territory. He was RB14 in points per game. Despite also getting a lot of touchdowns and getting a lot of red zone work, he was top 5 and inside the 5 carries with the Titans last year, and he was a total touchdown or bust guy. You were not happy with him when he didn't score a touchdown. You were happy with him when he did. The game script wasn't great for Derrick Henry in this game. The Chiefs got up early, but I'm concerned for the player. I'm concerned for the fact that he's a high injury risk because of his age. He's not really performing at the same efficiency level the last couple of years and into this game as well. Even despite the Baltimore Ravens being like a better situation, a better offense than the Titans were last year, their offensive line wasn't great. I wasn't drafting Derrick Henry at all. He was ranked outside of my top 36 players, and I'm sounding the red light here. Can't sell until you get a big game, most likely, but if you get a big game in week 2 from Derrick Henry, I would absolutely be looking to sell him because Justice Hill and him basically split snaps down the middle, and that's exactly what Tajay Spears and Derrick Henry did last year, and I'm a little bit worried for that, even if they're going to be in better game scripts going forward. And again, the player, the injury concern, it all starts to add up with Derrick Henry. So speaking of old players with injury concerns, Raheem Mostert looked not great in week 1. Etienne did, on the other hand, and Etienne ran 26 routes, had 7 targets, caught like 75 receiving yards. Mostert ran 20 routes and had 3 targets. The big upset for me is Etienne having 10 carries to Mostert's 6. I think a lot of us going into the season, myself included, and you guys know how high we were on Devon Etienne, would have expected a game script like this, Jacksonville, Miami, 49-point over-under. Mostert's going to find the end zone in this game, right? He's going to be the lead back, at least in terms of carries. He's probably going to score a touchdown. But we expected a year 2 leap out of Devon Etienne, and so far in one game, we're seeing one because Devon Etienne precisely would get 10 to 12 touches, 10 to 15 touches, probably not get a whole lot of red zone work, probably have to concede that to Raheem Mostert, but he had 17 opportunities in this game to Raheem Mostert's 10. He had 7+ targets. Like I said, he was used all over the formation, had a bunch of big plays. We know what Devon Etienne can do. The Dolphins had 2 goal line opportunities, both of which went to Devon Etienne, which is not something I would have expected even as a huge Devon Etienne guy. So again, Raheem Mostert is somebody that I would be sounding the panic meter on just a little bit. Again, keep in mind that he's still attached to a great offense. I'm sure there'll be better days ahead for him, but the split that we saw last year is probably not going to be the split that we see this year. And we expected that going into the season, but a lot of people didn't. A lot of people wanted to copy and paste 2023 Raheem Mostert into 2024 and be like, holy crap, what a great value you're getting out of him on the 8th round. I think it's more likely we get like an 800 rushing yard, 8 touchdown season out of Raheem Mostert instead of the 20+ touchdowns that he had last year because Devon Etienne is taking the next step in his development. So moving into Travis Etienne, this one definitely perked my ears up because Tank Bigsby was a real factor here. Etienne snap share 70% in this game, down from 74% last year. 46% of the team's carries, down from 68% over the full season in 2023. The routes were fine. The targets were fine. Etienne looked fine outside of the goal line fumble that he had that ended up costing the Jags potentially the game. The big issue that I had with Tank Bigsby and Travis Etienne split is that Tank Bigsby actually looked good. He had 12 carries for 73 rushing yards, and I would say that's yellow light panic meter on Travis Etienne for me because I think Travis Etienne's biggest calling card last year was volume and the fact that he had no backfield competition. He was getting all the routes, getting all the touches. If Tank Bigsby looks good, and I actually really like Tank Bigsby, the prospect, he just had a terrible rookie season, really young player. It looks like it was a big adjustment, a big learning curve for him going into the NFL. Travis Etienne could have a capped workload, could have a capped ceiling if Tank Bigsby is going to be a 30-40% backfield split. Don't love that for Travis Etienne. Definitely sounding the yellow light panic meter on him a little bit, but I wouldn't be like trying to sell him high or anything like that. I just think you got to temper expectations from maybe this guy can be a top 3 fantasy running back. 2, he's probably capped as a mid RB1. Javonte Williams, this one I am definitely worried about because I personally have Javonte Williams in our flock league, and he had a big-time dud. The offense looked bad. Bo Nix looked like a complete rookie quarterback and didn't really, drive the offense forward outside of the couple scrambles that he ended up having. This usage, also, number 2, is not what you wanted to see, especially not really what we were expecting either, because Jaleel McLaughlin actually worked more on early downs than I was expecting, and he actually outsnapped Javonte Williams in that area. Thankfully, Javonte Williams played the high-value role, which was 2-minute drill, long down in distance, and short yardage. So even though we didn't see a whole lot of scoring from the Denver Broncos offense, didn't see any kind of like goal line touches for Javonte Williams, I imagine he gets those looks, and also he was running routes and potentially catching passes going forward. So again, probably a yellow light panic meter, not quite a red light panic meter, but these 2 roles are a little bit concerning because I wanted to see Javonte Williams come out, have a 70% opportunity share, that kind of thing, and we didn't see that. He was more of a 50-50 split, but he was getting the high-value touches, so I'm still optimistic on him going forward, but it is definitely a yellow light panic meter. So those were the main guys that I wanted to talk about that a lot of people are worried about. Again, leave me any down below in the comments, and I'll try and address some more. I did want to mention like 3 whole teams that I'm worried about, starting with the New York Giants. Definitely a concern for this offense, but we knew that going in. We weren't expecting them to be a great offense, a team that was going to score 25 points per game on any given week. Specifically for Malik Nabers, I think that this is actually a pretty positive sign that he was out there running 100% of the team's routes, had a 19% target share in his first game, 11.6 PPR points in a game in which the Giants only scored 6 offensive points, no touchdowns. I think is actually pretty bullish for Malik Nabers because I think there's going to be better days ahead for this Giants offense. And those ugly-ass uniforms were, to me, a big-time jinx for them. So Malik Nabers is definitely going to be on the buy lows list this week because I actually really liked what I saw from him. He looked good, getting all the routes, getting some targets. Again, I think there'll be better days ahead for this Giants offense, but I'm still a little bit concerned about it, so I thought I'd bring it up. Carolina Panthers, I am definitely more concerned for this offense because they got bent by the Saints defense, man. It was really bad. I've been calling Dave Canales a fake sharp for a while. If you just take a look at what the Buccaneers did without Dave Canales and Liam Cohen instead, and then you take a look at what the Panthers offense did with Dave Canales, that should speak a little bit of volumes. Again, it's one game. I'm not super concerned, but there's going to be growing pains here. Dave Canales' offense took a couple of weeks to get involved with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Bryce Young did not look great. The offense didn't look great. The receivers didn't look all that good either. I mean, Deontay Johnson, gets open, as we know. Xavier Legette actually had some targets in this game, but the red light meter is on for this offense because Deontay Johnson, Chuba Hubbard, even Jonathan Brooks, once he's back, are you ever going to feel really good about starting these guys because of how bad this offense is, or at least how bad it looked in week 1? Again, just one game, but I'm definitely a little bit panicked about this Carolina Panthers offense. And then the Green Bay Packers, and not because they're going to be bad with Jordan Love on the field. It's because Jordan Love is expected to miss 3 to 6 weeks with a knee injury, an MCL sprain, and he could be a candidate to go on short-term IR for the next 4 weeks. And they have Malik Willis and Sean Clifford behind Jordan Love. This could be a big yikes for a couple of games unless we get like Ryan Tannehill signing there, somebody who's like actually a functional quarterback who knows the system. Short-term, definite stock down on Josh Jacobs, definite stock down on Jaden Reed despite the big game. Romeo Doubs, Watson, the tight ends, the other running backs, but hopefully Love doesn't hit the IR and it's just a 1 to 2 game absence and he's back. But again, 3 to 6 weeks is the projected timeline that fantasy docs are talking about right now. Yellow light for the next couple of weeks, but hopefully if you have some Green Bay Packers on your team, you're able to weather the storm for when Jordan Love comes back, because the offense did look really good when he was on the field. It's just that he suffered an injury, and thankfully he didn't blow his ACL because it actually did look like he did, and hopefully he is back on the field very soon. Again, anybody I missed, please let me know down below in the comments. While you're down there, leave me a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new. We still do have one more game tonight. I am actually rolling with a couple pick'ems here. You can see Tyler Conklin lower than 6.45 half PPR fantasy points, 4 higher than rushing and receiving first downs for Breece Hall, and then higher than 8.55 fantasy points in half PPR for George Kittle. Again, we got to get some tight end production here, and I think Kittle's the guy to do it. New customers on Underdog Fantasy can add in this Aaron Rodgers free pick and win up to 10x your money if you guys want to tail me on this entry. Sign up on Underdog Fantasy. Make sure to use code FSE when you sign up and receive up to $1,000 in bonus cash. And also, too, you'll get our weekly rankings manifesto for free all season long when you make a $10 deposit on Underdog Fantasy. Fantasy using code FSE. All the Vegas info I always talk about, all the matchup charts I'm always quoting, all the weekly start sit rankings you guys can need to dominate your league mates, that is available to you for free by signing up on Underdog Fantasy. And again, try and tail me on these picks. I have not been good so far on them. I've been 0 for 3. But we're doing pick'ems that's 6 and 10x your money, so I don't have to hit at like a 50% clip. These are basically just parlays. But hopefully we can get healthy tonight on this Monday Night Football game. Again, link down below for Underdog Fantasy. Make sure to check out the site Flock Fantasy as well to ask us start-sit questions, to get your team reviewed, all that kind of stuff. We have that available now, flockfantasy.com/FSE. Hit the link down below to get started. Like, comment, subscribe if you enjoyed. But with that being said, peace out. We'll talk to you soon.